Well, here we are again. It's pretty chilly and wet and very windy, so apologies for the production qualities of this one, but I'm running out of time this week and I've been waiting for an opportunity, and this seems to be about as good as it gets. This one kind of harks back to a piece I did a few weeks ago. The idea that there's a kind of tacit depopulation agenda. I was chatting with a friend of mine about the way that many social policies seem to lead to a place where the having of children, promulgating your species, seems to be discouraged in many ways. And chatting to them, they're something of a computer expert, very much into the Internet of Things and all that. And they suggested that it actually may go deeper than merely the effort to depopulate via birth control, that it was more active than that. I can't put this without getting too much into conspiracy theory land, but they were of the idea that many people under AI become useless to the system. They don't really have economic value. It was an interesting idea, and the more I looked into it, the more I realised there is likely to be some merit behind it. Now, a few weeks ago I was kind of looking into this and realised that there was some conspiracy theories going on, but I've been, how you feel like, as the conversation itself was unfolding, I was feeling like this does sound very conspiratorial. It does sound this sort of stuff on the more extreme fringe. But as we've probably learned in the last 4 years or so, a lot of what were thought of as conspiracy theories turned out to be conspiracy facts. A lot of the things that we thought were just a little bit mad and all that turned out to be perfectly true. And particularly in regards to government actions in regard to COVID policy and all that, there was an attempt to take over. There was an attempt to limit people's freedoms. There was an attempt to enshrine that in law. They did make us take vaccines, or try to force us, in some cases literally mandate it in countries like Germany and Austria, trying to force experimental vaccines onto people. It's just quite hard to kind of contradict now. There's a lot going on. As I speak, there's a situation going on in France where a lot of people are protesting about a change to the pension law, but there's also an underlying current that they're very unhappy about the way the government has treated them generally in recent years, and the high-handedness of Macron. It's basically a WEF clone, along with Rutte, Sunak, Trudeau, all the rest of them. But yeah, I kind of looked into the history of it, and came across this interesting piece by a guy you may remember if you know much about history, Henry Kissinger, who is still alive. But he wrote an interesting piece a few years ago when he spoke of old people as useless eaters. It was the idea that they weren't economically valuable anymore, and hence they were a waste of food. Kissinger, when he was born in Bavaria, somewhere within Bavaria, in Germany, in the late 1920s, early 1930s, something like that. And he eventually escaped, luckily escaped, as a German Jew. He was under some threat, but his family escaped to America in 1938. But he would have learnt the phrase and heard the phrase in German, forgive my German, Nutzloser Fresser, which literally translates as useless eaters, or useless feeders. It's quite strange that Kissinger should choose to use that particular phrase when he was well aware of the implications. The Nazis applied it to people with mental or physical disabilities who they figured weren't very useful to the state, so it was just a waste of food in their view. That's how it started, but as almost everyone knows. They then applied it to the Jews, the Slavs, communists, basically anybody who disagreed with them or they didn't like the look of. So it's got a pretty dark history. Now, as the world changes and AI comes in, the model is definitely changing. We're not, humanity is not as necessary to the economic model as it once was. And so many things are now automated. And the automation brings with it huge job losses. And the problem becomes, what do you do with those people? You look back through history, you had first of all you had the change in agriculture that forced people away from the land. People who would have been farm labourers went into cities. Then you had the actual industrial revolution proper, when a lot of processes were mechanised. And we went into the early 20th century when production, things like producing cars, was a relatively labour-intensive business. But as time went on, the mechanisation became more all-pervasive, more ubiquitous, and essentially nowadays I think most car factories are run by a few specialists, and computerization, ultra-mechanisation is the buzzword, I suppose, or buzzwords. Hence a lot more people losing jobs. Now there's a guy, actually I think I'll just tell a little bit more about Ted Kissinger first, because he has form in this area. It's not just these useless ethics remarks there, but when he was US Secretary of State for Security, I think it was, I don't know, let's think of several examples. Vietnam would be an obvious one, some of the kind of extreme bombing policies that went on there, use of napalm and all that, Agent Orange and all that sort of thing. Then there was the Chilean coup in 1973, which apparently he had a hand in organising. Then there was the Argentine Dirty War, where essentially the Argentine authorities, militarists put in place by the US government, basically went around law. Really, they didn't really do anything by law. They just got rid of their opponents. A lot of people were executed without any legal process whatsoever. So I suppose the Bangladesh war, when East and West Pakistan, as it was then, fought against each other, and the US under Kissinger basically took the side of West Pakistan, and a lot of what was then East Pakistan, which subsequently became Bangladesh, there was a lot of slaughters. Huge amounts of people killed, hundreds of thousands, maybe more, and all because of policies by Mr. Kissinger. So he basically does not seem, or he has not been, averse to the number of people suffering and dying due to his policies. Quite an evil man, really, and no surprise that he's connected fundamentally to the WEF. His policies are very dark indeed when you look into the implications of them. Another WEF character, quite a well-read and academic character, Mr. Yuval Noah Harari, recently wrote and spoke and lectured about what he considers the useless classes, or the useless class, to be more accurate. Basically people who are useless to their economic model, to their model. When AI takes over so many jobs that were even quite high level jobs that we previously thought were perfectly secure, no longer are. Even high level jobs like lawyers and doctors. I think it's fairly well known now that AI does a better job of diagnosing disease than most doctors can. I think they were beating the doctors 10 years ago. Now I think there's probably no comparison. So it's not just low-level jobs that will be replaced. It's basically everybody up to a very high level indeed, up to the elites basically. No doubt they'll still survive and have their present lifestyles buffeted in every way. But the rest of us are becoming increasingly surplus to requirements. So the question then becomes, what do you do with these people? Now Harari wrote that he feels the solution would involve getting people to play computer games and using drugs. It's this lovely vision of the future where we all sit around all day long on our couches getting obese and unhealthy, probably confined in our 15-minute cities, not able to go anywhere, just playing computer games all day long and occasionally getting high with the use of drugs. This, I don't know about you, but this does not exactly fill me with joy. I've got a young son, and the idea of him growing up into such a dystopia is quite disturbing, but essentially that's the vision that they have. That's kind of where we're heading. Now, the question is that so many useless people, according to what they see as useless people, of course they're not useless in terms of their family and friends and communities and all that sort of thing. They're only useless if your only measure is economic and the good of the elites. Those who already have huge sums of money and huge resources just are never satisfied. There's no end to what they want. Control over absolutely everything, it would seem, even down to seeds and the seabed. Apparently they're trying to claim that they actually own areas and things like that. Interestingly, I remember reading about Spain recently, where they're putting a tax on solar panels because apparently the Spanish government owns the sun, which is, not just on solar panels themselves, but on the use of solar panels, which is just bizarre. It seems counter the narrative as well. So the question becomes, we know this is going on to some extent. We know that there are moves towards depopulation. The question is, how active is it? That's what, essentially the point of my friend's point of view on that. How active are they prepared to be in losing large amounts of people? Now again, sort of trawling through the internet, you get some extraordinary figures come up. That they feel for the Earth to be, or some more extreme views, for the Earth to be healthy again, we have to reduce the population down to 500 million to 1 billion, which means losing 7 billion people. That's a lot of people. Now, to do that en masse would be quite a task, wouldn't it? But if you take away their food, for example, if you make food scarce, that will do it. That will do it. It will create all sorts of problems within society fairly quickly. A quick look at what they're doing in America. You've got Bill Gates buying up huge tracts of farmland. In Sri Lanka, they tried to force the farmers to use certain methods which were not very productive, and they've more or less busted the economy there. But perhaps the biggest one at the moment is in the Netherlands, where the vast majority of farmers and farms are under threat. Hello, Steve. Oh boy, get this walk and talk done. The vast majority of farmers are under threat. The government wants to buy the land, and it's under the usual sort of global warming excuse that putting nitrogen into rivers or something like that. It's just they just need an excuse. The global warming is a great one for them, and essentially they're trying to put all these people out of business. But the Netherlands are the second biggest producers of food on the planet, only behind the Americans, which is amazing for such a small country. If you take that out of the equation, that's a lot of food that you've stopped being produced and eaten. At times of food shortages, it seems very counterintuitive, unless your aims are really not the good of humanity in general. So, that's an obvious way of doing it. There's also, well, I dare say it, because you could get YouTube videos banned for this sort of thing, but essentially for a time in Africa and India, several foundations, including Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, were using a variety of vaccines on the natives, one sort or another, the people who lived there. And lo and behold, and miraculously, the effects on a lot of the women was they became sterile. And this was an unhappy accident. This is all happening a few years ago. And I remember reading in the papers how unfortunate, but also the reaction is how far away. But yeah, of late, it's come a little bit closer to home. I mean, with a certain recent medical treatments, shall we put it, trying to skirt around any problems, the high number of foul births and not abortions, miscarriages and things like that, and also high numbers of menstrual problems reported. These medical treatments do clearly have quite profound effects on the female reproductive system. So, unfortunate accident. I don't know for sure, but I would be a little suspicious. I am a little suspicious. So that leaves us really kind of in a situation wondering just how far this has gone, how far will they go, how active will be the process. But essentially, according to them, we are useless eaters. A lot of us are surplus to what they need. How willing are they, and how far will they go to use fairly extreme measures to both stop us reproducing and maybe more actively, well, what can I say? Exterminate people. Essentially, it was like it's like a very dystopian vision, and I wish there was no sense in this. But when you see so many threads of that kind of stuff coming together, it's kind of hard to conclude that there is not some kind of intention behind it. And okay, I may well be wrong. It is kind of the edge of what would be considered reasonable to believe, but increasingly the evidence is pointing that way, I'm afraid. And we're heading into some very, very dark times. There is some hope. Like, for instance, what's happening in France right now. These people like Sunak, like Macron, like Trudeau, like Rutte, they are being opposed to some extent. I wish it was more opposition in my own country, the UK. But there is the feeling now that many people are waking up, if not to these kind of more extreme scenarios, at least to the notion that these governments, run by the acolytes of the WEF, are not doing anything really in your favour. It's not their concern. They have to dress it up in certain ways, they have to make it look good, but their primary focus is on WEF policy and advancing an agenda that really does not do us any good whatsoever. Okay, I think that will do for today. Sorry about the bad quality. The weather's been all over the place. It's now beautifully sunny, but when I started out it was actually raining. Had to try to get this in. I probably won't get another chance, so this is going to have to be it for this week. Usual thing, like, subscribe, comment if you wish to. Check out my Substack. It's a sexagenarian's view, it's called, because I'm in my late 60s now. So yeah, check that as well. It's usually go into these same sort of things in somewhat more detail. And hopefully, all being well, see you next week. Bye bye for now.